President Buhari participates in non-aligned movement summit, assures member countries of efforts to halt spread of COVID-19.
We must all encourage and empower our scientists and medical experts to join the quest for a vaccine and cure to this.
Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 threatens to revert to total lockdown as NCDC confirms 245 new cases in Nigeria.
Federal government receives another tranche of Abuja recovered assets from United States and the bailiwick of Jersey.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss the relaxation of the lockdown, matters arising.
Now, following the hue and cry over total lockdown of the country, particularly in FCT, Lagos and Ogun states, by Nigerians as a result of coronavirus pandemic, the federal government announced relaxation of the lockdown effective from the 4th of May 2020, which was yesterday.
However, the relaxation of the lockdown came with additional measures aimed at containing the spread of the virus.
These measures include ban on non-essential interstate passenger travel, partial and controlled interstate movement of goods and services, overnight curfew from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. and above all, mandatory use of face masks or coverings in public places, in addition to maintaining physical distancing and personal hygiene.
Well, Joma, you'll recall that President Muhammadu Buhari in a nationwide broadcast a little over a week ago said the relaxation will be followed with aggressive reinforcement of testing and contact tracing while allowing for the restoration of some economic and business activities in certain sectors.
Exactly, Kingsley. And as Nigerians enter day 2 of the relaxation of the total lockdown, reports from various states indicate that many citizens are yet to come to terms with the reality as they continue with their day-to-day activities without observing the necessary measures outlined by the health experts to protect themselves from getting infected by the virus.
Well, reports arrived that some Nigerians, particularly here in the Federal Capital Territory, congregated around financial institutions, including banks, without physical distancing, while motorists overloaded their vehicles with commuters not wearing face masks as advised by the medical experts.
The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, during its daily briefing, expressed displeasure over the disregard for its guidelines in the markets and financial institutions and threatened to revert to the total lockdown if Nigerians fail to conduct themselves properly.
But as the relaxation of the lockdown progresses, with also increasing number of confirmed cases of COVID-19, are Nigerians ready to take responsibility for their actions? And are people effectively and wisely utilizing the relaxation of the lockdown, or are they abusing the opportunity? Now, should the government impose stiff penalties, as it were, on those who fail to comply with the guidelines?
And Kingsley, the big question is, are we ready to be accountable for the consequences that might arise as a result of the non-compliance, considering the way people troop to the city from all angles? How best should we conduct ourselves to avoid the pandemic? Do people really care for their lives and their health, or are they after the economic pursuit? It's good to have you join us on the program today. I am Juma Yusuf.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. You know what, Juma? I mean, people are still looking at the numbers and saying how many people have died.
It's not
a couple of weeks ago, the numbers were at single digits.
Yes.
Now we are saying the numbers are climbing very close to 100, and elsewhere around the world, you can see the explosion, the number of deaths. Take the United States, for instance. The latest model shows in the U.S. that By the end of the rampage of COVID-19 in the US, nearly 140,000 people will be dead.
Yes.
And already worldwide, you have over 250,000 persons who have died. And that's because, of course, the coronavirus is very much alive. And it is not just a disease of the rich, it's a disease of everybody if precautions are not taken, and particularly if those individuals have underlying conditions. We thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria. As always, we are reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, and we are right here in the nation's capital, Abuja. In the course of our program, we have our regular complimentary segments. This, of course, will include newspaper review. In the meantime, let's join Usman and Leo for the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Usman.
Good morning, Kingsley. Here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari has participated at online summit by the non-aligned movement, where heads of government of the movement are of the view that national and regional and global strategies will be required to tackle the pandemic. The president says the task before the international community remains daunting and more needs to be done to reduce the impact of COVID-19. State House correspondent Jide Onifade reports that President Buhari at the summit assures that his administration will intensify efforts to curb community spread of the virus in Nigeria.
We must therefore form a united front against this common enemy by being coordinated and timely in our response. Furthermore, we must all encourage and empower our scientists and medical experts to join the quest for a vaccine and cure to this universal plague. In addition, we must acknowledge the central role of the United Nations and the World Health Organization in fighting the pandemic. It is therefore essential to fully collaborate and support their initiatives in coordinating the international fight against the pandemic. Such efforts should include the protection of our medical workers, the provision of medical supplies, especially test kits, and ultimately finding a vaccine to cure the disease. Mr. Chairman and Excellencies, let me state that in the spirit of solidarity, we must collectively appeal to international financial institutions to assist member states in cushioning the negative impact of the pandemic.
In the meantime, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC) as at 11:45 p.m. 4th May 2020 announced 245 new cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria, increasing the number of confirmed cases to 2,802. Of the new cases, Lagos, Katsina and Jigawa topped the chart, with Lagos having 76 confirmed cases, 37 in Katsina, 32 in Jigawa, 23 in Kano, 19 in the FCT, 18 in Borno and 10 in Edo states, while Bauchi recorded 9 cases. Others are Adamawa, which has 6 new cases, Oyo and Ogun states 5 each, while Ekiti, Osun, Benue, Niger and Zamfara have 1 cases each. So far, 417 patients have been discharged, while the death toll is now 93. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has warned Nigerians that relaxation of 5 weeks lockdown could be reverted if its guidelines are not strictly adhered to. Chairman of the task force, Boss Mustafa, says this warning has become necessary following observations of clear breaches of PTF's guidelines on day 1 of easing the lockdown.
The chaotic scenes around the banks and other financial institutions indicate that there is observable high level of breaches by the citizens. The PTF fully understand the desire of Nigerians to come out to continue their lives after 5 weeks of lockdown. State governments and security agencies have, however, been advised to enforce the measures rigidly, and violators will be prosecuted.
Yes, we might have a few extra infections today and tomorrow, but what we don't want is an explosion of new infections. If we do have that explosion, there will be almost no choice left for the leadership of the country than to ask all of us to go back into our homes.
And on the economy, taking steps to mitigate the impact of coronavirus pandemic on the nation's economy has led to the inauguration of a technical working group by the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. The group is to draft a framework for the macroeconomic growth of the Nigeria Agenda 2050.
In carrying out this assignment, the team is expected to, among others, prepare a robust and broad-based macroeconomic framework to facilitate the development of the Nigerian Agenda 2050 and Medium-Term National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. Improve on the work of the technical staff of the ministry with necessary adjustments.
Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami says the Federal Republic of Nigeria on Monday, 4th May 2020 confirmed the receipt of more than $311 million of the Abuja assets repatriated from the United States and the Bailiwick of Jersey. A statement by Special Assistant on Media and Public Relations, Office of the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Dr. Umar Jibril Gwandu, indicates that the amount increased significantly from over $308 million mentioned in the press release issued in February 2020 to over $311 million because of the interest that accrued from 3rd February to 28th April 2020 when the fund was transferred to the Central Bank of Nigeria. He noted that the litigation process for the return of these assets, titled Abacha 3, commenced in 2014, while the diplomatic process that culminated in the signing of the asset return agreement on the 3rd February 2020 by the various governments commenced in 2018. In a bid to contain COVID-19 and cushion its effects in the face of economic realities, the Northeast Development Commission has presented palliatives in form of food and medical equipment to Adamawa State Government.
Ordinary face mask, we give you 500 packets. Infrared, we have given you 2 pieces. Hand gloves, we have given you 400 pieces. White hand sanitizers, we have given you 400 pieces.
We assure all the citizens of Adamawa State that the government of Adamawa State will ensure transparency and fairness in the process of distribution of these items to the people.
And that's the news highlight this morning. The program continues with Kinsley and Jume after this break. Stay with us.
Thanks for rejoining us. Now, with the easing of the total lockdown and gradual reopening of businesses around the country, it has become an important endeavor to safely bring goods and services without putting the citizens at risk. More on this on Business News with Abdul Karim Zurmi.
With the gradual easing of lockdown in major states, it is certainly a cause for concern as the number of cases continue to rise. This is especially true for businesses, as it has put a definite strain and has forced them to adapt to changes around the world. That being said, it has become equally important to capitalize on technology long underutilized to further strengthen a presence in the business world. Social media will play a bigger role in the coming months, as far more consumers are likely to be on the lookout for safer ways of purchasing goods and services.
General scale, anything that has to do with online activation, online communication is key. So anything you're doing that doesn't inculcate that, you are lagging behind. But of course, you and I know that there are several businesses that cannot operate online. For instance, barbing your hair. You know, you can't barb your hair online. So those are the other sectors that will remain shaking for a while, since people are not going out to, barb their hair or make their hair. But however, we are all in it, but there are different things that even the common barber could begin to do online to self-sustain until there is a pipe down of the whole pandemic and, of course, the lockdown across board.
Now let's head to the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange to see how the market fared on Monday, 4th of May 2020. business news. Abdul Karim Zurmi.
Many thanks, Zulmi, for the business package. Next is newspaper review.
And our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Toby, is in the studio. Good morning, Bayo.
Thank you, Juma. Good morning.
How did you get here this morning?
Yes, the roads are jam-packed again. Everybody seems to be on the highway. But I thought it was only civil servants between grade level 14 and above, and it was supposed to be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But the highway is thick again.
Wednesdays,
and Fridays, yes.
Well, we'll begin with the Daily Sun newspaper. Just at the airpiece of the Daily Sun newspaper, federal government receives over 311 million worth of Abuja assets from U.S. bailiwick of Jersey. You find that story on page 25. And the bold headlines there: as lockdown easing goes away, fears over guidelines breach in Lagos and Abuja, with rider residents flout rules on social distancing, compulsory face masks wearing, and orders. Another lockdown looms if. That's coming from the NCDC bus. And you can see the picture story there. Gridlock in K2, Lagos yesterday. And right, you see the picture of customers besiege a commercial bank in Abuja in contravention of the social distancing order. And COVID-19, Buhari seeks international cooperation. With a rider, 14 medical workers test positive in Katsina. You find that story on page 3 and 28. Federal government begins evacuation of 4,000 Nigerians from 75 countries tomorrow. That's today. Find that story on page 6. Wike orders lockdown of Port Harcourt, Abuja, Akpo, with a rider debunks charging levies for online classes. Find that story on page 27. And at the bottom plate of the Daily Sun newspaper, COVID-19, federal government admits signing up for drug trial. With rider as health workers union faults government's decision to relax lockdown. That story is on page 6 and 8. Labour raises the alarm over plans by federal government to retrench workers. That story is on page 28. Yes, Leah.
All right, New Telegraph on its front page is also focusing on the breaches of the relaxation of the lockdown. Federal government to Nigerians, be organized or we will lock down again. Abuja and Lagos residents ignore COVID-19 directives. Customers besiege banks, shun social distancing. 4,000 Nigerians in China, US and UK willing to return. Details on pages 3 and 5. 16 Lagos doctors infected with COVID-19. That's the story you'll find inside the paper as well.
Well, let's start with the update with the coronavirus. There are reports from the Punch indicating that as at today, there were 245 new cases, bringing it to a total of 2,802. Lagos has 76, Katsina 37, Jigawa 23, Kano 19, and Federal Capital Territory 18. So far, we had 8 other deaths, bringing the total now to 93, while the total persons discharged is 417. But there are concerns expressed by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, and the indication that should there be an increase in community transmission as a result of people ignoring all the medical advice regarding wearing masks, social distancing, and maintaining hygiene, there will be no choice other than to place the lockdown again. This advice was given by the Presidential Task Force when the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control addressed the nation yesterday at the meeting of the Presidential Task Force. Also at the same venue, the Honorable Minister of Health also warned health facilities that they should not reject patients, especially emergency, as such are unethical. He also indicated that Nigeria will be interested to be part of the trial for medicines for COVID-19 under the auspices of the World Health Organization. Meanwhile, there is indication that Nigeria, with the president being appointed the champion of COVID-19, there is all indication that Nigeria is making sure that is targeting and monitoring of community transmission is the bane for which it is hoping to reduce the transmission of COVID-19. The president declared this during his non-aligned virtual conference for which he participated yesterday. President who was appointed by the West African sub-region as the champion for COVID-19 indicated that the solutions required is based on the fact that emphasis are on community transmission to ensure that the transmission is stemmed. Meanwhile, a couple of lawyers have filed a suit threatening to sue China to the tune of 200 billion naira as damages for the introducing COVID-19 into the world. However, the China embassy in Nigeria has indicated that China is also a victim like every other nation, and therefore China has actually put all its act together to contain the virus from spreading across the world. And he has also indicated that our people are also victims and will join hands with the rest of the world to fight this common pandemic. The outlook yesterday was very challenging, especially at the banks. I personally went to a bank and the bank was closed and people were directed to a specific branch. So you have many branches closed and few open. So you have all customers belonging to that branch converging at the bank. And so you have a crowd that is not wanted in an era of COVID-19. So if many of the banks had opened, we were likely to have seen less of such rush. And don't forget that people have been at home for first 2 weeks and second 2 weeks, and many of them needed to replenish their resources. And so there was that run on the bank. And also, there was no distinction between those who wanted to withdraw and there are others who ordinarily just wanted to carry out transfer. So providing them forms to fill outside, which may not necessarily require them to go, because if they provide all the details, the transfers could be done. But you know, sometimes banks are stick into their rules and procedures. They find it difficult to adjust into circumstances like this.
Well, Bayo, thanks. I think part of what I saw, particularly in the central business district of Abuja, was just poor crowd management. Now you have explained that a number of branches were closed and so customers were directed to the branches that were open. What then did the banks on their own do to control the crowd? Now, if some of the banks just simply shut their gates, and I think they were allowing a trickle of customers. I mean, not too far from us here. There were a couple of banks that I was driving past, and I saw them, and I said, okay, fine, you admit only a few persons into the banking hall at any particular point in time. In the meantime, you have a crowd outside, and they are mingling, and there's no social distancing, assuming there's some transmission. Why they are mingling outside. Now, when they come into the banking hall, will they not also transmit it to your staff? Yeah. So I think there was just poor management of the crowd. And if the security officers, and I think whoever the branch managers were at those particular times, they ought to have taken that into consideration. That is for banks. Now, if you went also to the Banex area, which is Wuse 2, where you have computer accessories and all kinds of things, a number of those malls, or plazas, they shut their gates. So I think they were allowing customers in groups of some few numbers, but in the meantime, we just found that they stretched the road there, Adetokunbo Ademola as well as Hamidu Kano, they were all clogged with vehicles, and people were coming out of their vehicles and then seeking to get into those plazas. So it's as if, I don't know. I mean, one doesn't want to be uncharitable. These are persons who were crying for palliatives a couple of weeks ago, and then suddenly everybody's out on the street. And it's not everybody, by the way, who was on the road yesterday and even today that is necessarily required to be out.
Well, they said from level 14 to 17. And look, I didn't go out yesterday because I was actually scared. You know, it's from office to my house. I don't go out. But from what I heard from people that came in from town, it wasn't a good story, and I am so afraid that this could just, you know, come out very, very wrong. A lot of people are going to get this virus if we're not careful about it.
I think it's a wrong understanding of the lifting of the partial lockdown. Some felt that after being locked in for 2 consecutive fortnightly situations, it was opportunity now to get out. It's a natural anxiety, but then one must identify that out there is an epidemic which we are trying to fight.
Of
and
which
so
many people don't
if you have to go out, it must be exceptionally necessary before you go out.
Exactly.
We'll see what the result is like in 2 weeks' time.
Naturally, after 14 days,
yes,
we just hope. Test and then
what we saw in Abuja is the same thing that was replicated in Lagos.
Yes.
I mean, just the streets were all clogged, the usual traffic, and so on and so forth. So, and in the meantime, Kano is another epicenter where all of this is. I wasn't out in the night, so I wouldn't know whether there was sufficient respect of the curfew imposed from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Yeah, from Lagos end, by the time the curfew came into being, there were so many vehicles also still on the highway. And that is a big challenge.
But we said that.
Yes.
I mean that there has to be a special dispensation for Lagos. I was listening to the state governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, some days ago when he was restating that the curfew will be from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. And the simple thing to just ask would be, if you were on the Third Mainland Bridge or the Co Bridge or any of the arterial roads in Lagos, and then bumper to bumper, I mean, if you were going to arrest persons, where is the detention center where you put them?
Well, the other story is about some of our compatriots who are abroad, about 4,000 of them now, who are serious of coming back home. The evacuation is likely to commence on Wednesday. The Minister for Foreign Affairs gave this indication. However, according to Punch, it is reporting that those from the United Arab Emirates are likely to arrive on Wednesday, those from United Kingdom on Friday, and those from the United States of America maybe next Monday. Upon arrival, they are expected to be quarantined, and upon arrival to ensure that they don't import COVID-19 into Nigeria.
You have enough space to take them all?
That has been the challenge that has been delaying them, and it's still a worrying. But they are making arrangements because they are not going to come all in the fell swoop. They will come in batches, and by that way they will be able to allocate them. I think the points of entry are likely to be Lagos and Abuja for now.
Okay.
That's right. The Minister of Foreign Affairs had earlier indicated the difficulty in securing hotel accommodation because, according to him, a number of the hoteliers were unwilling to release their facility for the accommodation of the returnees so that the stigma doesn't attach to that particular hotel. But I think they have scaled that initial challenge, which is why the evacuation is commencing tomorrow. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay, let's go to the editorial now. It's coming from the Nigerian Pilot, and it says, "Don't use non-paid pensioners' fund to fight COVID-19." I'm just going to read a little out of it. The plan by the federal government to dip its hands into the over 10 trillion PENCOM fund as part of very desperate measures to shore up funds to make up for the 2020 budget revenue shortfall as a result of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has been raising hairs by critical stakeholders, especially labor unions and pensioners who are directly affected by the stark failure of contributory pension fund administration in Nigeria. You know, and I'm going to go a little bit further, that remember, our ears are still itching to hear from this evasive government, especially the presidential task force on COVID-19, how much in comprehensive terms it has received from local and international donors in the fight against COVID-19. What and where are the material donations? Who gave what?
Well, there is concern about donations for COVID-19, but many people overlook the fact that some of the donations, majority of them, are not coming in cash as they assume. They are actually coming in kind by way of facilities that is required to tackle COVID-19. But you know, in the atmosphere of Nigeria, where we are waging war against corruption, the moment you mention a donation of money, people want to look where it is going to, how it is going to be utilized. It is because our danger signals about corruption is on high alert at all the time. But be that as it may, relating to this, there have been pressures and suggestions that the 10 trillion worth of fund that is at pension is lying idle and should be used to supplement our budget. Those fears may not, those suggestions may not be very, very necessary, because just as you read in that report now, $311 million, part of the loot that was recovered from the late head of state, has now come in, and they are meant for three critical projects: Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Abuja Kano Expressway, as well as the second Niger Bridge. That is going to take a whole relief for the budgetary requirement for those projects. You also will recall that just the Senate resumed of recent, and what they did was to approve 805 billion naira worth of loan. The whole idea was that the loan that was supposed to have been sought abroad will be sought locally. Therefore, this is to provide funds for requirements for 2020 budget. So the pressure of sourcing for funds to execute the 2020 budget as a result of downward, a low trend in our revenue is not as heightened as it is before. But be that as it may, if pensioners as January 2019 have not been paid their pension, then it's a worrying situation, particularly in this critical period. People who have served this nation at their best of prime are now in retirement, and for January up to May, we are now the fifth month of the year, they have not been paid their pension. That is very critical, because many of them have to live on their pension payment, for their children and what have you. So the alarm that perhaps there could be a resort to the pension fund may not be as pressing as was before, but concurrently with other sources of alternative, I think that expectation may not, and that fear expressed in the editorial may not arise.
What is the basis for the assertion or claim that pension funds are idle? You have 10 trillion and then the money is idle.
And pensioners have not been paid.
The Act provides for investment of pension funds.
Yes.
And what cannot be invested in, or what the pension funds cannot be used for.
Yes.
I think that we have to be careful, how we use terms and use expressions. So that when you say, oh, the money is idle, it's just there, so go on the peak and then use it to fund either recurrent expenditure or some capital projects in your yearly budgetary cycle. We have to be careful, because before we got to the stage of having this new pension regime, we had seen, how pensioners had been humiliated, and a number of them had died in misery and penury. So what happens? Assuming there is some downturn in the economy going forward, and then the pensions are due, are you going to tell those persons who should have a right to their pension that at the material time, oh, the pension should not be paid, but then you have a crisis on your hands? And you're going to have a geriatric problem of old persons whom you cannot cater for, old persons whom you are owing, and so on and so forth. I think there should be more creative ways of looking at this. And if the pension funds or the pension assets are not being properly managed, then the government also ought to look into that and say, look, this money is not just idle. How much income is coming from the investment of these funds? Because it's supposed to be such that you don't just have 10, assuming you have 10 billion. If you don't come back next year and it remains 10 billion, there are safe investments that you can get into, and that 10 billion will grow gradually, so that as persons entitled to the payment of their pension are taken out of it, you still have the funds there for those who will be getting into the pensionable bracket. I don't think that it's right to assert that pension funds are idle. So 10 to bring 1 trillion, let's use it for something.
And knowing that they are not even part of the palliative.
And the contributors are both in the public sector and in the private sector.
And the time not to do that is this critical time. We are facing the pandemic, for which people whose age are advanced are potential, but if they are not careful, could be potential victims.
And they should be, I think they should have a special place in palliatives given to, people across the country to ease and cushion the effect of COVID-19.
I don't know. That's Bayo. I would like to thank you for being around.
Thank you.
See you again tomorrow. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break. Now, when we return, we'll be looking at matters arising from the relaxation of the lockdown and the apparent chaos that we have seen in major cities around the country.
And to begin our discussion on the relaxation of the lockdown, let's get the views of Nigerians as put together by Aisha Uba Ali.
I can see compliance because all over the people around, you see them, everyone with his own face masks, and it's only very scanty people around, which I believe is only from level 14 to 15 that are around, and so I believe that there's compliance.
Well, I think people are complying a little bit, but in some offices, when you go, like my office now, when you go, people that are even level 4, level 5, they came to the office. And when I was going, I did not think that I'll see people from that level, they say 14 above. Because if the office is congested, it will not be convenient for people to be there. You'll be afraid. For me now, I would have been in my office alone, but some people came. I now sent some home, but some are still there. People are tired of staying in the house. They now came. And some people came, they thought that they would give them things in the office like sanitizers, as the government proposed that they should give sanitizers and mask. But there was nothing like that in the office today when we went. We don't know of tomorrow. That is it.
Some carry 2, some carry 3. And based on that, they take. Most of the drivers are taking advantage on it to hide the price of transport. Like initially, I used to spend just 200 to get to where I work. But today, I spend over 400 naira before I get to. And now, like maybe sometime, if I'm going, I enter direct. You can see me, I enter from Itama and drop here now. Maybe before you know, I will enter up to 3 drops or so before I will get to where I'm going to. Before you know, it will take me up to 300. That means probably I'll spend over 700 naira before getting to town. So you can see from that angle that it's not easy. And the people are not complaining, most especially bus drivers who want to make it to recover. They still carry as normal. I don't know if they believe on that.
It should be proper advocacy on the other low cadre workers that there's no need to come. And if you are not being short paid, then you can relax, because that's a government decision. As far as the decision is to help the masses, it's okay.
Well, that's from a cross-section of Nigerians interviewed yesterday in Abuja by our correspondent Aisha Ubali. Let's get ahead now with our guests who are in the studios. First, let's introduce Dr. Francis Fadile. Dr. Fadile is President, Nigerian Medical Association. Dr. Fadile, a pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Pleasure. Good morning.
David Akoji, who is the Special Assistant to the Director General of the National Orientation Agency, NOA, is also here with us in the studios.
Good morning.
David, pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And still in the studio with us is Musa Suleiman, Head, Mass Transit and Heavy Truck National Union of Road Transport Workers. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning.
Yeah.
And from our Kano studio, we have Dr. Godwin Tadam, Chief Consultant Epidemiologist of the Federation. We thank you so much for joining us, as usual. We thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, let's begin the conversation. Gentlemen, we saw yesterday as the first day of the relaxation of the lockdown, and also the first night of curfew from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. What are your views on the observance of the accompanying requirements of the lockdown? And relaxation of the lockdown. Dr. Fadile.
Well, thank you very much. I think the populace responded as we think they should, being kept in the house for quite some long time. And it made it very difficult for them to be controlled properly. Going around, you see a lot of people, both those who are supposed to come out and those who are asked to stay behind in the house. And this actually made the surge of people gathering together to be everywhere. We see them, we see gathering of people at the gate around the banks, the markets. You have a lot of people. We have a lot of vehicular gridlocks, and we have a lot of people cramping themselves within the public transportation. And these are some of the fears we have in easing out the lockdown. I think we really need to look for some enforcement if we are going to be serious in ensuring that while the government is pursuing easing of this lockdown, we want to stall the transmission of COVID-19.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll now join our Kano studio where Dr. Godwin Tadum is waiting. Dr. Godwin, with the peculiarity of a place like Kano and with the relaxation of the lockdown, what is your insight into what actually happened yesterday? You know, from so many reports reaching us says that there was no compliance actually.
Well, I must first of all commend the people working in Kano, the epidemiological team, the State Ministry of Health, the institutions, and the support received from the Governor, His Excellency Dr. Abdullahi Gandoje. A lot has been happening, and we are all here to actually support and synergize with the team. I must tell you, the lockdown is very effective here. Even this morning, coming from Tarauni through Nasarawa to where we are now, we didn't see a single vehicle. What that means is that the lockdown is very, very efficient and very effective here. I cannot say when you go far away from the center, because most of the problems we are talking about in Kano is within the 8 municipal local government areas, and if you come here, the compliance is very, very good. People seems to be getting the message, and the use of face mask also is very. If you go out to see people, the few people are outside using face mask. So I must tell you that people are complying to the directives. There was no crowd anywhere. Things are just going on normally within the state capital. That is the municipal area.
Thank you, Dr. Ntado. Let's come back to our studios here. David Akoji, what's your reading of what we saw yesterday and are likely to see again today in terms of people's response to the easing of the lockdown?
Okay, I think that in taking the decision to ease the lockdown, government was between a rock and a hard place. Very difficult decision to make and to balance, between our struggle to contain the coronavirus and the need to also ensure that our economy is functional to some extent so that revenue is generated. We have seen clearly that the bulk of our population are daily income earners, and that there's a lot going on in the private sector. Now, a long stretch of shutdown of that entire economic chain will have far-reaching implications. So I think this informed the easing of the lockdown. We're in a learning curve, Kingsley. What we saw yesterday was not encouraging at all. For us at National Orientation Agency, we felt deeply disappointed because it would seem that our consistent messaging on the protocols perhaps have not struck the right chord, with the Nigerian population. People were seen mixing, People were seen, in crowds in various places in Lagos, Abuja, and Abuja, especially. We found that to be very, very disturbing. But like I said, it's a learning curve. As the days go by, just like Doctor has said, we think that government will reinforce its enforcement strategy to ensure that people begin to comply largely. However, enforcement is really not all that is required, because you can only enforce when you see. And the biggest portion of this disobedience to the protocols is happening in places where there's little presence of enforcement agencies. So Nigerians need to know that it really lies in our hands. We need to be responsible. This virus is dealing very heavy blows to various countries across the world. We have been fortunate thus far. No life lost can be waved away with a wave of the hand. We have been fortunate, and we need to work and cooperate with government to keep the curve from escalating to unmanageable proportions. I think that's what I want to say to Nigerians.
Quite a scary situation there you're painting. I would now like to go to Malam Musa Suleiman. You've heard from the reports that most drivers of commercial vehicles are overloading, increasing the amount people usually pay, and not really paying attention to the gravity of coronavirus in our society today. What is the Road Transport Workers Union doing to ensure that there's compliance in how passengers are conducted from one point to the other, from what we saw yesterday?
Yes, what happened yesterday is very, very disappointing. Like what the previous speaker said, the easing started yesterday, and before now, we didn't have a means of communicating to our members. But yesterday, there is a lot of report on non-compliance from our members, and that informed us calling the FCT Council and Lagos State Council to at least tell them to have an emergency meeting so that all our members will be directed to at least comply with protocol, social distance, and make sure that any passenger they are carrying must have his face mark.
Well, I still want to be with you, Musa Suleiman. While the country was on lockdown, or just before the country went into lockdown, more particularly Kano, the FCT, Lagos, and Ogun states, how much enlightenment did your members get? I'm asking this question because here in Abuja, during the lockdown, particularly in the small hours of the day, you will see members of your union in painted cabs scrambling around to pick up passengers, and those cabs at that time were still overcrowded. And by yesterday, of course, all rules were completely broken. So how much interaction in terms of public enlightenment did your members get?
Yes, since the outbreak of this coronavirus, we have been at least engaging our members in enlightening them about the seriousness of this disease. And most of our members who are working, you know what happened, there are so many drivers with painted vehicles that are not fully members of the union. We have some other organizations like Return, Segdan, and this Barkate family. So, well, I will not say that our members are not going against the rule, but they are very, very few. And you know, in any organization, there must be a bad eggs. So, but majority of our members are complying. And we, like what we are directed to do in Motor Park that time, we provided hand wash and sanitizer. So there is a lot of publication, a lot of sensitization before the lockdown. And now after the lockdown, we are going back to sensitizing our member so that they should comply with the protocol.
Okay, thank you so much, Malam Musa Suleiman. He's head Mass Transit and Heavy Truck National Union of Road Transport Workers. I'll be coming to you now, Dr. Francis Fajule. You know, a lot of Nigerians are dying, getting infected. The numbers keep going up, and some of your members have, you know, tested positive to COVID-19. Why is it so difficult for Nigerians to comprehend that coronavirus is real and can kill?
Well, I think it's largely dependent on the group of people who need to educate the public. And again, we cannot take off the effect of the mass media, the social media effect. On the first one, the people who ought to inform the public, give proper information, either private or public, many of them did not follow up in pursuing those information to the downtrodden. Number one, we have not seen any place that either the traditional rulers or religious leaders are seen actively, apart from closing the mosques, closing the churches, which, yes, everybody felt it or is feeling it, but for them to come out and talk to the congregation, we have not seen that one actively. Many people believe in their clerics, and they take some of the information pass hook, line, and sinker, but we are not using them effectively. Secondly, doctors, lawyers, some professionals within the society are molders of the views of the society. How much of those group of people are you using to disseminate information? You see, we must know that, yes, television, it is not everybody who watch the TV, the radio. Many of the elites do not have a radio set in their house. But those who are walking on the streets, who are struggling, they needed someone. So we are not connecting very well. And some of the elites are compounding the issue because they keep coming and telling people that there is nothing like coronavirus. We have had some very, either it is true or not in the social media, very senior citizen in Nigeria saying, I've been hearing coronavirus, I've not seen one. This made a lot of people to say, look, there is nothing like coronavirus. Again, in one of the states in this country, we heard that some of their leaders told them that there is nothing like coronavirus, and we saw people washing hands and drinking the water and say, their teacher has said there is nothing like coronavirus. These are signs that had boldened the belief in many of us that there is no coronavirus. And we have this suspicion with the information given by government. A lot of us believe that government don't trust them. And the government needs to move from that level to get to people who are working with them. And I think these are where we have the problem. Unfortunately, the doctors who are supposed to also be a bridge gap talking to the patients, the doctors are not empowered to do such. I'm not talking about involving them, but individual doctor, wherever you are, you talk to patients, you see patients, but when you don't have the necessary gear, and you know that you are risking your life, you cannot have interface. So it is more of, let me be careful, let me talk less, let me have least of interaction. And these are the issues that are confronting us that we must be able to break down. I'm happy the NO is here. We need to do something different.
How frustrating is that for the medical personnel?
It's very frustrating because you want to help. You see a patient who needs help. You can't help if you don't have the necessary gear, because you know that if you go and do that, you can get infected. You don't have another home. You have to go home. You can infect your... Many doctors have their parents with them, have their children and wives. So it's a very difficult situation. It's a very, very difficult. And to compound it more, a lot of people look at doctors, since they are the face of any health facility, doctors and nurses, and they see them as being callous. When you are there and they expect you to take action and you are hesitant, they will not look at the management. They will not look at those who have not given you the necessary gear for you to protect yourself. They see doctors, nurses, and frontline workers as being callous. And we want to plead with the government. It is high time we changed this narrative from saying we will supply, and when you get to the actual place that you needed it, they are not there.
You know, Dr. Fadule, thank you very much. We'll return to you. You've raised some very pertinent issues with regard to the effectiveness of public information management aimed at behavior change. David Akoja, I want to bring you in here. Was it necessarily a case of the failure or inadequate communication? Because for several weeks running, media organizations, traditional and social media, have been awash with information on COVID-19, wide variety of it. We've had spokespersons and so on and so forth. We've also seen here on our program local government managers who have expressed some great deal of frustration in terms of how much of such information has cascaded down to the grassroots, instigating the required behavior change in those persons. And simply put, I mean, they just blamed it on the obstinacy of Nigerians. As Dr. Fadule was saying, nothing will happen. The person will wash his hand in the finger bowl and drink it and then circulate the video. So, what exactly are we seeing here? We know that the level of illiteracy in the country is pretty high, but to, as it were, be caught in this kind of disaster, it should be worrisome.
The point that Doctor made concerning mixed messaging, especially from the onset, contributed a great deal to the disbelief in the existence of the virus and its potency in claiming human lives. Dr. Fadule was very correct when he said, and this happened not only in Nigeria, in the US, for instance, at the onset, President Donald Trump expressed disbelief in the existence and potency of the virus, of the coronavirus. Ditto for the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, until he actually caught it and went through the experience that he did. Back here in Nigeria, we had elites, religious, political, and traditional, who were caught on tape, showing disbelief in the existence of the virus. And these people have a lot of followers. Now, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, Nigerians need to understand that there's a national response strategy to what's going on with the coronavirus. I think that the national response strategy with regards to risk communication requires some tweaking. The point that Doctor made concerning inadequate, consistent sensitization at the grassroots is correct. And this is happening largely because in the national response, risk communication response strategy, it is conceived that the coronavirus is a health challenge and that you require health expertise to be able to communicate its risk in terms of sensitization and mobilization. Now, what does that do? It puts National Orientation Agency on the back seat. and it puts health promotion officers in the local governments, in the wards, across the country, in the front seat. Nigerians don't seem to know this. We are not originators of the messaging that is required for the people to know, because the messaging requires health expertise. It is only when these messages are established and we begin to see them out there that we pick them and then run with them, knowing that we are not in the front seat, we're not in the driver's seat for the risk communication component of the coronavirus pandemic. So that is the strategy. And because that is so, NOA, like he said, has not been empowered, to use its national footprint, which is established across the 774 local governments, and its experience in grassroots sensitization and mobilization to fully bring to bear the implications of this virus at that level. This is a challenge, at another level. The third component of it is what I said earlier, that God has been so good. I do not discountenance any life that has been lost so far, but our fear at the onset has been assuaged by the efficiency that's been put into the management of this virus pandemic at the level of the presidential task force on COVID-19. We are yet to see widespread contagion like we anticipated at the initial stage, especially drawing from our experience in what's going on in other countries that are far more advanced, whose citizens are more obedient and responsive to the protocols. We have seen what's going on in the United States. As a day before yesterday when I monitored it, I think the death toll, 24 hours, was in the neighborhood of like 4,000 or 5,000 or thereabouts. We have seen what's going on in Italy, in the UK, in Spain. These are countries with far more advanced citizens in terms of their ability to understand the messaging protocols and to adhere. But look at us here. I think we shouldn't take this grace for granted, especially seeing what has happened yesterday when the lockdown was kind of relaxed. National Orientation Agency is doing a lot. I can tell you that, Kings. We're in the villages, in the local governments, within the limited capacity that we can, given the fact that we're not in the driver's seat and we have not been empowered to be in the driver's seat. We're doing a lot. Our staff in the local government are making a lot of sacrifices. We have made jingles in various languages. Our people have done motorized advocacy going from street to street, even within the period of the lockdown. In this period of relaxation of the lockdown, we are coming up with new messaging and new strategies. I shared some of our messaging with NCDC for validation yesterday. The results just came back to me that, yes, you can go out with these messages. But Nigerians need to be patient with us, need to be patient with the entire response strategy of the federal government to COVID-19. And as we can see, it may not be perfect, but I tell you, it's yielding better results than we have seen in advanced countries.
Apart from not being empowered by governments, to do your work the way you would want to do it, how equipped are your staff in the area of prevention, preventing themselves from getting the virus? How equipped are they?
That question that you ask is extremely relevant, and I thank you for asking it. It's yet to be recognized by the authorities that our staff who go into markets, who go into motor parks, who go from street to street, engaging with people and explaining the potency of this virus and the protocols for prevention, are not being viewed as frontline responders to COVID-19. And that is actually not fair, because we are as exposed even as the medical personnel are. In fact, we are more exposed because the medical personnel are experienced. They know what to do. They can easily recognize symptoms and they know what precautions to take. Our people are inexperienced, and which takes us back to the point I made earlier on, that it requires some level of health expertise to even do the risk communication. It's not your everyday sensitization. This is a unique case. It has to do with a very potent virus that has capacity to spread easily. You don't need 2 contacts with the carrier to be able to catch this virus. And I think that much more attention should be paid to National Orientation Agency and our staff on the field.
All right, thank you very much, David Akojo. Let's return to Dr. Godwin Ntadom in our Kano Network Center. Dr. Ntadom, you indicated that the level of compliance with the lockdown in Kano has improved tremendously. I know that you're part of the presidential team that has gone to Kano to try to get things right after the apparent chaos that we have seen in that city. In the meantime, what is it that your committee is unearthing? There were the unexplained deaths, and by yesterday, of course, an assistant commissioner of police had also passed on, an emir had also passed away. So what is it that you are discovering now in the city, and how much information is going around? I know that you talked about the free passage you had getting to our studios. Have you been to the inner city?
Yes, you are absolutely correct. We have gone, we have visited some of the sites. On arrival, what we did was to meet with the state team, and we discussed with them. They gave us the situation of things on ground. And we realized that the state already has been doing a lot, and we equally met with the stakeholders, some stakeholders. As I'm talking now, the leader of our team, Dr. Sani Gwarzo MNI, is in the His Excellency's office with our advisor, Professor Nasidi. So we've been doing a lot, and most importantly also, I want you to know that we really need to we have a team of experts with us here. We have a pathologist, we have family physicians, several of them are here. So what we are doing presently is to constitute a team, and they are already in the field. And we have even agencies like WHO is with us here, NCDC team is also here. So one of the steps we are taking now is to go to the graveyards, which the state actually has done before we arrived, and it's just to get all the necessary information and do what we call verbal autopsy, trying to interview the relatives and families of the people that are deceased. Then we look whether the story, the history tallies with that of COVID. If not, and the deaths that are occurring recently, which of course before they get buried, we have to get information on those and find out. But most importantly, it's good to note that a lot of information going out are actually not correct. Some say, Dr. Gwazo said that 80% of Kano state population is infected. That's not true. What he actually said is that 80 cases were found to be positive. In the previous day, he was misquoted. And he did not say that all the deaths in Kano State are due to COVID. That's not true also. What we are trying to do is to look at it. And I also want us to know that even though COVID is killing, we are not denying that fact. But also know that some people, like a few days ago, we had a case, the man died of diabetes. Sample was taken for COVID, but it came back negative. What it means is that people are actually dying of other conditions, which we have to investigate as part of our TOR terms of reference. So you can see there are several challenges on ground, like most hospitals are not functioning. Fear of COVID has made some private hospitals to close. So people are not even having access to treatment. So these are some of the things we are trying to look at and see how we can strategize in such a way that people that are having other conditions will not be turned back. Because if you are having you are hypertensive, you have problem, you go to the hospital which is not ready to accept you because they think you have COVID. You eventually go back and die. So several other things are happening that the team is looking at now, how to really set things together. And we also appreciate the support that Kano has received in these few days. A lot of individuals, Alaji Aliko Dangote, the Dan Tatars, the Isiaku Rabia, all of Bua, many of them, we have a lot of support coming from all especially the indigenes of Kano that are doing very well. And we have also had a lot of awareness creation. We've seen individuals like Alhaji Bashir Tofa coming out to address, and this being circulated on WhatsApp to tell them about the reality, what we are talking about. So people are now beginning to believe. Religious leaders now are now coming out to talk and let people know what is actually happening. So a lot of work is already being done within the system. Yes, Baba.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Godwin Tadem. We're now back in the studio. Dr. Fajule, you were going to comment on something he said from Kano.
Well, he was talking about verbal autopsy.
Yes.
And I think, while that is good in cases, but you see, there are so many things that we expect the PTF to institute. Number one, it is part of their time of reference to see how research are done. We need to have our own homegrown investigation. One, how do people who die from COVID, what is the process of their deaths? That is where I come in. I'm a pathologist. So we actually need the actual pathology so that we can say this is the process that led to the deaths. But before a pathologist can do that, you need a specialized, quote and unquote, autopsy room. And these are areas that we have, as NMA, discussed with the Ministry of Health and the PTF for them to see how some of us can give further information. All those that have died in Kano and anywhere in Nigeria, there is no autopsy performed on them. I have so many pathologists who are ready to do the autopsy, but you cannot just do the autopsy in the normal laboratory where we do autopsy. We need to put some engineering control system in those places. We are expecting if they do that, it can help us. Because by the time you do a cohort of 30, 40, you can say for sure, this is the process that led to the death, and this is how we can mitigate against it. But asking for verbal autopsy is largely inaccurate in this case. What is verbal autopsy? They will go and meet a relation of someone who has died and say, how does it present? What happened? This and that. And it is possible, if people around knows that there is this COVID-19 that everybody is trying to play so that they will not come and pick me and pick my family, and we have this issue of stigmatization, they will not give the correct information. He said something which is good. He said some of them die from diabetes. He said some of them die from hypertension. But we all also know that even the molecular testing we are talking is not 100% accurate. We have some gap in which it cannot detect a positive case. So we cannot say in all certainty that they are not. And especially those who died from COVID-19 infection are people who have comorbidity, hypertension, diabetes, respiratory problem, immune suppression. All this, as they can cause death, but with COVID coming in place again, made it more difficult, more easy for them to pass on. He made another allusion. He said many private hospitals have closed down, and that is correct. In Nigeria, private practitioners take care of about 60 to 70% of Nigerians. All the PPE we are talking about that has not even gone around, all the public hospitals, there is no plan to give the private facilities. The government always see the private facilities or private practitioners as a competitor. In this case, for you to treat a patient who is COVID, to treat a patient who has come with any form of disease, you must be able to protect yourself, protect your staff, protect the entire business. If you don't have all this PPE in place, you mistakenly take a patient who is having prolonged labor, you put her on your bed, your nurses have interaction, your cleaners have interaction, your doctors had interaction with such patients. You subsequently went to the theater, included the anesthetists and everybody. And at the end of the day, maybe second day, third day, is COVID-19. And every single individual involved had gone to their family members. You can see the complexity gone to the market. So these are the reasons.
Dr. Fadule, I know that you raised this point some weeks ago, if you recall, where you were talking about how, and then we had the Guild of Medical Directors also as part of this program, why there needed to be synergy between the public and private hospitals in responding to this. Apparently, not much has happened.
Nothing.
All right, so you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. We're taking a short break now. When we're
Welcome back. We'll now take excerpts from the PTF briefing that took place yesterday.
A little bit because it was the first day. We will have infections because of what happened today. No doubt about that. So, but how can we learn from the mistakes of today into tomorrow, next tomorrow? So by Friday, hopefully we have normalized some of these things. Yes, we knew today would be a problem. Everybody here knew today would be a problem because for the first time, people were let out of their homes. But now they're out, and now we have seen the sunlight again. The challenge for us as a society is how do we now organize ourselves to mitigate this risk, to limit transmission from each other so that, yes, we might have a few extra infections today and tomorrow, but what we don't want is an explosion of new infections. If we do have that explosion, there will be almost no choice left for the leadership of the country than to ask all of us to go back into our homes. So, for the benefit of having a few hours...
All right, that was the Director General of the NCDC and a member also of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 speaking at their press briefing yesterday following the surge of Nigerians in a number of capitals, Lagos and Abuja in particular, with the relaxation of the lockdown. I want to bring in again Malam Musa Suleiman of NOTU, that's National Union of Road Transport Workers. Well, in spite of the relaxation of the lockdown, there is still a restriction on interstate travel, exceptions being for those that are conveying essential items, petroleum products, for instance, and agricultural produce. But here's part of what we observed before the relaxation of the lockdown and while interstate travels were still prohibited. Some of the truckers were smuggling people from one part of the country to the other. And some of these persons being smuggled were hidden amongst livestock and other agricultural produce. Exactly what is wrong with your members that they do not seem to even appreciate the hazards of what they were getting themselves into and therefore further endangering the rest of society?
Yeah, you are correct. We have get a report of these kinds of bad attitude from some of our members, and that is why our president issued a press briefing, because he served in a committee at the Ministry of Agriculture in respect of this movement of essential commodities. So we have asked our coordinators of heavy trucks from all over the country to make sure that anywhere the trucks are loading, they should make sure that they did not carry passengers. Though there are some cases where some group of people will have food commodities, and they will shatter a vehicle, and all of them want to follow their goods. But we have met with AFAN, All Farmer Association, and we have discussed with them. We have agreed that they should talk with their members. If a group of people charter a vehicle, trucks, and they loaded their food items, they should choose a trusted person amongst them that will follow the good. And I think since when we had that discussion with them about a week ago, things are changing for better.
Okay, so thank you so much. But the problem is the trust issue. Most people will not agree, to just give somebody their goods worth maybe thousands of naira to just go and sell for them. The trust issue is there. So why are you working on that?
Yes. I think the AFAN, the chairman and the president of AFAN, they are the one that are coordinating that. So, and I believe they have a way of doing it because they know their members and they know somebody that they can trust. And even the chairman tell us that they are trying to at least convince the member that if there is any problem, their association should be held responsible.
Okay, thank you so much. We now have some number of tweets that came in, for our guests to respond to. I'll begin with Festus Akimboyewa, and I think he's referring to Dr. Fajuele. Our fragile health sector will soon be overwhelmed because of the ease of lockdown. We are not tackling COVID-19 with all seriousness. Again, Dr. Fajuele criticized government when the lockdown measures were put in place. He is now criticizing the government for relaxing the lockdown. Is he a politician? You get to respond to that.
There's no time I have ever criticized government for putting in lockdown. In fact, we have asked for lockdown earlier than when the government started it. And even to shut the borders and international flights, the Nigerian Medical Association came out 2 weeks clear before we did it. We have always been consistent with our views about lockdown. And when they said they were going to ease it, we came out fully and we said, no, it is not right. We are talking about life. You need to have life to enjoy livelihood. You need to have life to be able to do business. You need to have life and good health to do any other chores. If we cannot get the life now, every other thing is going to be half measure, a quarter measure, and we will not get the best.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Fadule. You didn't answer the last one, but we'll leave it. Is he a politician? But so we will leave, but you have already answered, Dr. Fadule. All right, Abdul tweets, people should not see the relaxation of the lockdown as a way of continuing what they were used to doing before COVID-19. Adherence to the new regime is key. Coronavirus is around, hence you need to be very careful and observe basic health guidelines.
And Cecilia Okoroma tweets, so much indiscipline by Nigerians. We must continue to remind ourselves that coronavirus is real and deadly.
Francis Obey, now it's good that the lockdown is being relaxed, even though there are indications that the number of infected persons is rising. The NCDC should also be looking at better options to tackle it because continuous lockdown could cause worse effect on the people, on the economy.
And Utolo Sunday tweets, the lockdown relaxation is totally out of place considering the rapid increase of confirmed cases on a daily basis and the nonchalant attitude of the masses towards the precautionary measures. May God protect us from this invincible enemy.
Innocent Yawa James, the lockdown should be carefully examined, and I would want to ask why Nigeria is relying on PCR kit for testing. These figures we get on a daily basis are just a child's play now that the lockdown has been relaxed with little adherence to the guidelines. If we don't look inwards, we're on our own.
And Omo Oshun tweets, the presidency was blackmailed into easing or relaxing the lockdown. Let's pray we all don't regret it at the end of the day. It appears many Nigerians still do not believe that COVID-19 is real. Federal government locked down Kano. The governor relaxed it in the midst of rising cases. We joke too much.
Chris Simeon tweets, lockdown relaxation is a gradual process, and as patriotic citizens, we must obey the guidelines and then protect ourselves and others.
And Nicholas Omoko tweets, the other parts of the country should emulate the strategies of Delta and Edo State. They put in place capable compliance measures, hence the social distancing and other NCDC guidelines it is adhered to. This is coupled to their good awareness campaign, especially in Delta.
All right, so those are the tweets that we can accommodate in the meantime. I want us to return to Dr. Godwin Untadon, who is the chief epidemiologist of the Federation. Dr. Untadon, I'd like you, give us your opinion on this. I'm sure you must have seen images from Lagos and here in Abuja, and then of course the comments made by the Director General of NCDC as to the likely effect of community transmission of COVID-19 from the surge of crowds that we saw yesterday. What is your prognosis in respect of this? That's one leg of the question. Second leg of the question would be, okay, how well are we testing? If you don't test and you don't have a result, you can't contact trace. And if you don't contact trace, by not testing in the first instance, you can't have persons to get into isolation or for treatment. And so exactly how are we playing along in this value chain of seeking to mitigate or combat COVID-19?
Thank you very much. Before responding to your question, let me first of all talk about what Dr. Faduile said. I don't want to preempt the outcome, or I'm not reporting on what the team has found. I'm just talking about the observation within the state, and at the end of the stay, the team will will submit a report which will actually capture most of these issues you've raised. Then concerning the issue of resurgence, the DG NCDC has said it all. The whole essence for instituting the lockdown was for people to stay indoors, social distancing, stay in your home, stay away from others. But what happened yesterday, especially in Lagos and Abuja also, showed that people have really not understood the whole essence why they have to stay at home for over a month. So if we continue to do this, the likelihood of increasing the cases is glaring. Is just we can't say it in any other way than the DG has said it. So it is important. The relaxation of the lockdown does not mean that the disease is no longer there. It's still there. It's still increasing. But I think people should begin to learn to be self-disciplined now. Like we kept on saying, social distancing still continues. Maintaining respiratory etiquette, wearing your mask at all times, and ensuring that you limit the touch, the contact you have with objects, not only individual, even objects. This will help us a lot in the long run. So these are you cannot continue to lock down a system continuously. You think of the economy, you have to do a kind of social balancing and ensure that one does not degenerate completely while you are trying to correct the other. So it's a balance that I expect our people to understand. Like in Kano now, the message is going down. Like like I said this morning, the whole streets were empty. No, you can't see anybody outside. And that means that even when there are no police on the road, no military on the road, people are just obeying the instruction, which is very good for the state.
There has been expressed fear about community transmission. With the relaxation, what do you see?
In Kano, the relaxation is just a staggered relaxation in a way. Like His Excellency has actually created days where people can go out to make purchase. It still boils down to the same thing. That you cannot continue to keep people at home, like we say. What we say here is only go out when it is absolutely necessary. Go out when it is absolutely necessary. So, and so many concerns have been raised also. There are some people who are not government workers who earn on daily basis. These people, but the state also is putting up a lot of palliative measure to see that these people don't suffer continuously in the face of this challenging period. What we should realize also concerning what the verbal autopsy, it is not, we are not in a normal situation now, and we have to put a lot of things into consideration, religion and other factors. Is it feasible in a setting like ours to begin to exhume corpses? And you have to look at it from other aspects apart from the medical component alone. So these are just trying to reach a kind of compromise to ensure you get some result that will be very useful for the system to make a good decision.
Thank you very much, Dr. Godwin Ntado. Let's come back to David Akoji, who is of the National Orientation Agency. That's a strong linkage between hygiene issues relevant to the containment of COVID-19 and the WASH program, water and sanitation hygiene. But we also know that we are up against certain cultural practices. There are parts of the country where people use chamber pots, and you also find persons, in the course of performing ablution, what they do. And you have all of this precautionary pieces of advice with regard to not touching certain kinds of surfaces, metallic surfaces or objects, and so on and so forth. I don't know. I'm not saying, assuming we had a wildfire of an infection through our populations, are we in a better position now to say, look, communicate this to the people so that they know what to do, that what they were doing in the past will be unhelpful during this pandemic?
You see, with regards to this, I think a lot of mileage has been achieved by the Risk Communication Committee of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, of which I'm a member. What we have done is to recruit notable voices. For instance, the Sultan of Sokoto, who is at the head of the religion of Islam in Nigeria, has lent his voice, to some of the practices and protocols that should be observed even during the Ramadan, and he has also spoken to the issues of the ablution, which you referred to. This has also been achieved with a number of other religious leaders across the country. Khan is speaking on the side of our risk education and has recruited quite a number of pastors also to speak on the positive side of promoting messages of prevention and containment. So I think in that regard, a lot of mileage has been achieved. What remains to be said at this time is the fact that Nigerians need to be circumspect. Government deemed it necessary to establish a lockdown at a time when our infection rate showed a record of like 20-something, 30-something. Government was alarmed enough to establish a lockdown. Today, we are seeing infection rates in the neighborhood of close to 3,000, well over 2,000, as we speak.
On the basis of testing.
On the basis of testing. Now, what that tells the average Nigerian on the street is that the risk is higher today than it was when the lockdown was first established. Now, that should speak some sense into us. What it then means is that you stand as an ordinary Nigerian on the street today with this relaxation of the lockdown. You stand a higher rate of getting infected if you do not observe the prevention protocols than you did when the lockdown was first established. So we must show a higher level of sense of responsibility as citizens. You know, our safety from this virus actually lies in our hands. We should stop looking at government and calling government at every juncture. Today, government is doing the best that it can, but our ability to prevent ourselves from being, from contracting the virus rests squarely in our hands. And it lies in obedience. Obedience to the established protocols. Wearing your mask correctly, washing your hands with soap under running water, using sanitizer, and all the other established protocols. So I think Nigerians should take responsibility.
Okay, thank you, Dr. David Okoji. Based on that, I'll come to Dr. Fajule. You know, you listened to the NCDC boss yesterday. He was clearly not happy about it, and he said we might revert to the lockdown again. Do you see a possibility of that?
Well, seeing the trend of infection, yesterday was 245 newly diagnosed. The day before was 180, before then 200 and something. We are having an exponential increase. About 2 weeks ago, 2 Fridays ago, we hit the 1,000 mark after 4 or 5 weeks. In another week, exactly 7 days, we hit 2,000. That was last week Friday. We are in Tuesday. It's likely we hit 3,000 today.
That's a scary situation.
We are 2,800. If we have another 200 today, we hit 3,000. That is explicit enough. Either we are increasing our testing capacity, or we are doing what we have been used to do. It shows that we are having exponential rate of transmission. From 7 weeks to 1 week to 4 or 5 days. Who knows? When we get to 50,000 tested Nigerians, maybe we'll be close to 10,000. So we have a big issue in our hands. 2 days ago, PTF came out and they said they are running out of bed spaces for isolation. If we have large number, we overrun our bed spaces. If you say, now those who are positive, we will revert back because they have changed. When they started, we were saying, take everybody who is infected off. They say, do self-isolation. At that time, we had no community transmission. Self-isolation, you pass it around, and today it has gone beyond us. Now they are saying, come and do tests. Now we are testing. If we get to that critical position, if we do not stall it now, in that critical position, that it overwhelms our capacity, we will be forced to have those who are positive in fact, we don't even know how many people who are positive outside. Yesterday, we had Lagos State saying that they have 3,000 untested samples. If Lagos is bringing out 7480 in the last few days, that the total number that has been that have been done every day is about 1,000, 1,005, and you have 3,000. Then, if you want to extrapolate, you know that 3,000 will be around 150, 200. So we have a very delicate situation in our hands.
You know, Dr. Fadule, thanks a lot. One of the points you raised, and this I would like you to be very brief about this because we're pressed for time now. The attitude of medical personnel during this season. I mean, we heard what's happened in Kano. We've also seen, on the basis of self-preservation, what medical personnel are doing. That some persons who visit medical facilities have been turned away. So how do we overcome this? I mean, it's not necessarily everybody, who has an ailment that is probably COVID-19 positive. I mean, there's a case of a young lady who was electrocuted somewhere in Lagos, and her partner complained that it was on account of the fact that she was treated shabbily at the medical facility, which is why she passed on. So exactly how do we overcome this? By our members, we do know that they also have their own challenges in terms of PPEs and all of that. But people do fall sick. Before COVID-19, people were sick. They didn't fall sick and they didn't go to facilities.
Well, it's a difficult situation and position. And if we have seen that the Honorable Minister of Health consistently warning health workers to be properly kitted to see patients, I think that answers for himself. It is difficult for you to go. Today, I can tell you, up to 15 doctors in Kano State are infected. We have had cases in which the first few deaths by amongst medical practitioners are cases that are not conventional COVID-19 symptoms related. They came totally different from what COVID. So a high index of suspicion must be in place, and if you have that, you must be properly protected before you see a patient. And I think, like I have said before, don't look at those who are in the front line that you interface with. Look at the management. Let the government, the management, and everybody concerned put the necessary gear in place, and let us be able to function appropriately.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Francis Fajule, President, Nigerian Medical Association. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you
We'd
very
also
much.
like to thank David Akoji, Special Assistant to the Director General of National Orientation Agency. It's been a pleasure having you
Thank you
on
very
the
much.
program. Malam Musa Suleiman, Head, Mass Transit and Heavy Truck, National Union of Road Transport Workers. Thank you so much for coming on the program. And from our Kano studio, Dr. Godwin Ntadam, Chief Consultant Epidemiologist of the Federation. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
All right, so that also does it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Well, thank you for tuning in. Back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, stay safe and stay well. I'm Kingsley Sadomo.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. Do have a great day. And remember to observe the social distancing and stay safe.